Hey, you. Thanks for tapping into Untapped Keg. I'm your host, RJ Zimmerman, and today I am excited to be joined by former entertainment business manager, now program director and therapist, and author, Jonathan Schwartz. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on this lovely podcast.
Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a really great conversation, and I think for many people who've listened before, but they know that I have pre-meetings with the guests, and ours was really, really exciting. It was fun. It was like I had to turn it off, but I didn't want to. We were just driving so well. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I am too, and I like your approach. It's more collaborative, so thank you.
I really appreciate that because that is what I'm looking for, and that word just it hits home and puts a big smile on my face. So thank you for that. Um, Jonathan, to start us off, could you give us a little bit into a background into who you are and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, who I was and who I am are completely two different people. Um, like one of my favorite pages in the big book is where it talks about the double life on page 73, right? I lived that double life. My past career was an entertainment business manager, as you mentioned in the intro, with high net worth celebrities, music, film, TV, and professional sports. And, that was a 20 plus year run. Within that period of time is when my active addiction really started commenced, and just self-sabotage seemed to follow for about 6 years. And so ultimately, my big demise, which we've talked about, um, when I got in trouble for committing a white collar crime, embezzling over $7 million from a handful of clients and being sentenced. And we can talk more about that when you want. But that brought me, when I re-entered society, I had an opportunity to really reflect. And it was important for me to give back to my brothers and sisters what was once given to me. And today, this is the most joy I've had in my entire life, working with people like myself, with the way that my mind works. They understand. I understand the way their mind works. There's no judgment. Um, and it's just for me, just to, know that every day I try to help as many people as I can. And the operative word is try, because, I cannot help everybody as much as I wish I could. And so for me, just making, the next right action for me is walking into the treatment center, Altus Rehab, every morning and asking how clients are. And, if they want help, I'm here to help them. And if they don't, I understand that. Maybe just in that moment they're having a bad day. But where I am today brings me the greatest joy, just knowing that I surround myself with sober peers. And those are the healthiest people for me in my life today.
There's so many avenues to go there, but I think something that you brought up that is that last thing that you brought up, like who you surround yourself with being who's healthiest for you. What was it that brought you to that understanding?
That's a that's just an interesting perspective, and I'll share it with you. So in 2016, my crime became public in terms of media outlets and otherwise, and I received a call from my Eastern Western medicine doctor, and he asked me, I don't even know if I asked the right word. He instructed me to meet him the next day at someone's home, gave me the address. I have no idea why I'm supposed to wear a suit and go to this home that I know nobody. So I trusted my doctor. I went, and he wasn't there yet. I walked into this house not knowing a single soul, and I looked outside in this person's home, and in his backyard there was a rabbi giving a eulogy for people who are crying because they believed that the owner of this house was dead. So the doctor arrives, and I asked him, "What is this?" He said, "This is a staged funeral. The person who lives here fears death, and he's watching upstairs on a camera and listening to what people will say about him at his funeral. And the people don't know that. The people don't know this is staged. They believe this is real." So to your original question, when we leave, The doctor asked me, Jonathan, what was your takeaway from this? I paused for a moment. I processed that question and I said, I think my takeaway, doc, is this. In the height of my career, I make this number up, maybe 600 people would have attended my funeral. Of those 600 people, 98.5% would be in attendance out of professional obligation, not because they care about Jonathan Schwartz. Today, if I were to pass away, I'd be grateful if 50 people attended my funeral because all 50 of those people care for me and love me deeply. And so that was that crossroad moment for me when I realized and continue to subscribe to this that quantity of people is not important, but surrounding myself with quality of people, people who are healthy for me in my healthy version of selfish, are the people that I allow in my quality inner circle. And that includes having to set boundaries, right? For people who are unhealthy for me. And it's not limited to just people that are sober, but it's I have people that are not sober, but also respect my journey in recovery and respect who I am today and not judge me from my past.
Ooh, I love that. My friend Erin Brown, she uses the term, audit your orbit because it's very, I don't know who said it originally, but that somebody said, you are the sum of the five closest people to you. And then there's, something around that orbit, like outside of that, but the five closest people to you, are they for you? Are they against you? Like that is really what you're going to adopt. And so she said, audit your orbit. You got five people who are going to be close to you. Are they going to help you get to where you're going? Is that what you want? And I absolutely love that. And I love how you took it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's sober because I noticed for me, it's that same thing. What is the quality that I tend to surround myself with right now is people who are introspective. People who are introspective and looking to give back to those around them. Like that's the type of person that I surround myself with. And that quality over quantity is so amazing that I think we get confused a lot of times, which is more important, or which aspect, especially early in life.
Yes, especially early in life, and also for me, even early in addiction, right? In addiction, I was insecure. I put up this facade that I was a successful person, when deep down inside, I didn't even really know how to connect with my own emotions. And so I was a people pleaser, which is one of the common character defects in myself and many other people like me, right? Because of that insecurity, I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to say no because I wanted so badly for people to like me. And in recovery, I'm no longer a people pleaser and I can set really healthy boundaries. And a lot of people that come into treatment, when I say that, they think they need to over explain to set a boundary. But really, best method is through assertive communication, right? Which is just a fancy clinical term for healthy communication and not over explaining, because that's a thing that we do in active addiction. But in recovery, let's be clear and concise. Set that boundary. And if the person doesn't accept that boundary, then that person's likely not welcomed in your inner circle, whatever that boundary is that you want to set, because it's important for us to set boundaries. I'll speak for myself. For me, it's very important to set boundaries with people.
I would say for a healthy person, it's important. They just maybe they have that intuitively, but like that's your journey's so similar to mine in that parallels. And that's why I love having these conversations and why this podcast has been so transformative for my journey because there are so many parallels, even though we've walked our own unique path. There are so many parallels that you can take and use in your life. Like people pleaser here, over explainer here, right? And you said something there that made me like a light bulb went off where I think that this might be insinuated, but I don't know if it's often stated. And it's something that if somebody can think about, um, maybe it'll give them an understanding into themselves. And that is when you said that in your addiction, you were insecure. And it's like, is there anybody who's secure with addiction? Like, I don't think so. Like that's an insecure, like a projection, defense mechanism, wherever you want to go with it. But there's an insecurity there. That's why it's happening. And that's something that's powerful if you can give yourself that grace and that understanding.
Absolutely. And it's that secure attachment to dependency on drugs and substances, and for me also including gambling, a behavioral addiction. That was my escape, right? To numb, which is and but you're right. I mean, that is another thing that's really common amongst people in active addiction. I mean, I probably had 70 character defects when I was working the steps. And still some of those defects may surface from time to time. But today I have that strong self-awareness, and I could follow it up by really positive reality-based self-talk to change my inner dialogue and rewire my subconscious mind. But it took me years to get there.
Mm. I I would bet for anybody who's been on this journey, it is something that years is a common time frame because you can't overdo or undo years of self-torment overnight, right? That's for
If
sure.
only we could.
That is, I think that's what a lot of people look for is that magic bullet, like that unicorn, the magic pill, the what's going to be the one thing that's going to do it overnight. And unfortunately, just like most things in life, there is not one thing. It's a bunch of little things.
I agree, and I have to say that's a really good point. I'm grateful that there's no magic pill that overnight I can transition from active addiction to a strong, sustainable recovery because I say that simply because it really afforded me the opportunity to reflect on all of my past, whether it was my trauma or whether it was my poor choices that led me to a sentence of 6 years in prison, or just not being emotionally present for my family. Given the amount of time it took me, I needed that. I needed time to do some soul searching and to reflect. And so, for that reason, I'm grateful because without reflection, I likely wouldn't be here on your beautiful podcast and talking with you. And so, because I put in the work, because I soul searched, because I became transparent and authentic and vulnerable and cried for days and months to connect with my emotions, I can say those things today.
There's this understanding that is across so many different religions, across so many different philosophies of if you are given the destination, are you really going to appreciate it? Are you really going to know what to do with it? It's that journey that teaches you to be able to appreciate that destination. And then if you can learn to appreciate that journey, now you can learn to appreciate that thing in life. Um, and that's something that's really beautiful. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Um, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Honestly, if I didn't start the podcast and then that led me to my self-discovery journey and seeing myself reflected in other people and actually having an understanding of, oh, there's some deep stuff that I need to recognize that I didn't even realize I had an opportunity to recognize.
Right.
And that's like having that open mind to be able to look into your past in not in a way to hold it against yourself, but in a way to understand yourself.
Beautifully said. And the way to let it go, because like I don't live in my past, but I also don't
Yes.
forget my past.
Yes. And when you can give yourself that understanding, so something that you mentioned earlier was that self-talk, that how you could consciously, this is something that I think some people might take and be like, that's a little bit over my head, but you can consciously rewire your subconscious. It's actually the only way you can rewire your subconscious is by consciously doing something. And your self-talk is such a way that, I mean, it's the way to be able to do that. And um, something that I found for myself and I found for other clients that I've worked with, right, is being able to understand it's okay to make mistakes, being able to understand that it's okay to be human. And so when you look at yourself and you see that humanness, and
Mhm.
then your understanding of that and you're okay with it, it's a way, it's not, it's just such a freeing way to be able to understand why you are where you are in your life.
It- Correct. And it's true. Like, I in active addiction always tend to self-sabotage and complicate my life, right?
Hmm.
So in this new part of my life journey, the most important part, which is the recovery journey, as a therapist, a program director, a group facilitator, an advocate for addiction, redemption and people in addiction, I try to simplify things today because people tend to overcomplicate things that really can be broken down. And the way that I simplify this sort of rewiring of your subconscious or changing the soundtrack, as they say, or rewiring your brain, just saying rewiring your subconscious mind can scare clients away. But
Hmm.
when I present it to them this way, and it's because I applied it to myself. I didn't have strong self-awareness in active addiction because I was careless and I didn't care to be aware of anything. And I certainly didn't follow it up with positive self talk because, first of all, I really didn't share much with anybody because I was like scared, living in fear of getting caught, and people finding out that I was embezzling money and using and gambling every day and using cocaine and other drugs. And so for me, it starts with self awareness, right? If I'm aware that I'm catastrophizing, if I'm aware that I'm negative thinking or future tripping, now I can recognize that through my self awareness and I can follow that up with positive reality based self talk. That's how simple this can be, broken down. Okay, because I know I wasn't aware or connected to my emotions in active addiction. Now that I can connect with my emotions and the way that I think and or behave, I can course correct that by simply implementing positive self-talk. And it has to follow that order because how can I start with positive self-talk if I'm not aware? Right? So this awareness is
Yeah.
a gift that I think people in recovery can give themselves. And I also think they can take the antithesis of what's not reality based, what's irrational in terms of this, the negative thinking, catastrophizing, and change it to reality based, positive self talk. Now, if you can do that, you can then form a habit. And if you're forming a habit that's so healthy, that's a method of rewiring your subconscious, right? We don't have to get into neuroscience and the way that the brain works. That's going to probably put me to sleep, you know,
Me too.
right? But when clients walk in and when I talk to sponsees and so on and so forth, for many of them, they resonate with that. And they leave
Hmm.
treatment saying that's probably one of the most powerful relapse prevention tools that they've acquired. And many of them have been to multiple treatment centers. Because we could talk about picking up the 500-pound phone and calling your sponsor, right? But in real time, high cravings, that's difficult.
Yes.
But what we can do is be aware that of the negative consequence of a craving, understanding those consequences and changing the narrative that I'm not willing to risk those consequences today because today in recovery, I am risk adverse. In fact, I like to call myself a nerd and a proud nerd because today I practice the principles of the program. I'm not perfect. I try to practice them most of the day, but there are days that I don't. And I'm kind to myself because, again, I'm human. I make mistakes like others.
Hmm.
But at least this program has given me the tools to not let it like really manifest within me where I'm now going back to old patterns of behavior.
Yes. Yes to all of that. That was so powerful. What a great way to be able to start to understand that power that you can start to cultivate. And I do want to point out the elephant in the room. You want to talk about nerd? Like I got Ghostbuster book and a proton pack that works with movie sound effects behind me. So I'm here with you. Like we are kindred spirits.
There we
But
go. Two nerds.
that's right. Um, One thing that I would like to know based on your story is when did you start to recognize your self-awareness was a superpower?
So in May, I'll be 9 years sober. I would have to
Congratulations.
thank you. I would have to say that I probably didn't learn that until 4 or 5 years ago. 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Because for the first year plus, I was in such still like denial.
Hmm.
I refused to accept that this was a lifetime for me to attend 12-step meetings, to understand that there's alternatives to 12 steps like Dharma or Smart Recovery. Like I didn't want to do any of that early in recovery. I don't know how I was able to maintain, but thank God I was my abstinence and sobriety. But it really started probably in 2020 when I re-entered society and I faced so many challenges upon re-entry that I looked for all the and I was catastrophizing. And I was playing the self-pity, woo me victim role when I had an ankle monitor on for 16 months of home confinement after serving my time in prison. I couldn't get jobs, and the jobs I got were not what I thought I would get, and my mind was not thinking appropriately. And yet I was sober, but here's how I like to say it: I was abstinent. Abstinence is free from substances, or in my case, including but not limited to behavioral addiction like gambling. Sobriety, being sober, is a lifestyle. It's doing the next right thing. It's applying the principles of the program. It's walking into a Starbucks and making sure you open the door for an elderly woman or a child, which maybe I wouldn't have done in active addiction. It's learning to be patient in line, um, where other people are just as important as I am. Who am I to say, hey, hurry up, please, I'm waiting here. So for me, the abstinence existed in the first 4+ years of my life, of my recovery. But what I was missing was the sobriety, the lifestyle of doing the best right thing, the next right action, and having my thoughts and behaviors be congruent with pro recovery behavior and thoughts. And that is why I say in 2020, when I returned into society, I adopted that sobriety to my journey, and in which I learned so many tools, including but not limited to the internal dialogue and changing the narrative.
What was there like a moment or was there like an epiphany that you had that you can point to and be like, that was when like the light bulb went on that you needed to switch from this abstinence to this sobriety, like adopting it as a lifestyle?
Yes, it was when I stopped crying on the couch for 9 months when I came home that I was playing such that victim role I mentioned earlier and woo
Hmm.
me. And my therapist said, enough already. Stop. Like, there are many people worse off than you. It's time for you to adjust into the real world. And that was like, I needed to hear that. And that's what I loved about my therapist. She was candid, she didn't sugarcoat it. And I needed someone like that who could be blunt with me and say, like, literally, I'm not exaggerating. I cried almost every day for 9 months, like feeling the world was just going to collapse on me, that the catastrophizing. And then when she told me to stop, and she said it in such a beautiful way, like a therapeutic way that resonated with me, that was the moment where I realized it's time for me. I even called up my sponsor and I said, I don't want to be in AA anymore. He said, okay, because he knew darn well I really needed it. And I didn't. I was so fed up. The next morning I called him. I said, you know what? Can I recant that? And would you please take me back as a sponsor because I'm fully committed now to the pro recovery lifestyle. And ever since then, this is the only lifestyle I know to live today.
I love that story that you're sharing because I don't know how many people found themselves in that space. Maybe it wasn't crying on their couch for 9 months, but in a space of self-pity for a long period of time. And I think there's so many people who know someone like that, but they think that the kick in the ass has to be something that is really forceful in a, I would say, aggressive manner. And the way that you described that was it was more of an assertive manner, which there is a difference. And the difference is one has compassion behind it, right? And so that's the same thing with our self-talk that you can start to develop and it can get there. Like sometimes we think we have to be aggressive in our self-talk, but if you can change it to that assertiveness and still challenge, but in a way that you're compassionate with yourself and you're understanding, and that can really kickstart the transformation that I think a lot of people are searching for. And that's what's beautiful in your story. And I have something similar where it was like all of a sudden I look, I have two choices. Like I've had that two times in my life. And the first time was when I chose to stop drinking. I could either have alcohol in my life or I could start a career, start a family. And it's like, okay, guess I'm going to start a career and a family. And then I could continue the way that I'm going, or I could start to and figure out what the hell is going on inside of me. And that was when my wife came and asked me for a divorce that started me to get this podcast, to all of this. And so in those moments, it's like I wasn't so mean to myself. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you still drinking? It was, no, you have two choices. Pick one, right? And that it was the same thing. Two choices. You can continue to be the miserable asshole that you are, or you can figure out what the hell's wrong with you. And maybe you can be a less miserable asshole. So let's go with that one, right? Like, but that assertiveness, and you mentioned it at the beginning too, the being assertive is such a gift to be able to find that.
Yes, it's the best. It's the only way I know to communicate, right?
Hmm.
Assertively. Because how many times speak for myself, I was so passive aggressive, right, with people. Like I was so
Oh, yes.
manipulative, right? But today, assertive communication doesn't ha is that's not part. There's nothing. There's no manipulation anymore. There's no dishonesty and trying to, you know, lead someone to do something for me. Today, it's all about just assertively creating those boundaries. I love how moments ago you used the word choices because one of my biggest takeaways, probably about early in recovery, midway in my recovery, was this concept of CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Hmm.
The thing that I take away from that is that most choices I make in a given day have consequences. So before I make a choice today, most of the time, again, not all the time, I ask myself, what's the irrational side of this choice or the negative consequence of this choice? And what's the alternative? What's the positive consequence of this choice? Something, again, something so simple that I never applied in my life in active addiction, right? Okay, so if I want to have a brownie at 10:30 p.m. tonight when I go to bed, who am I to complain if I'm gaining weight? Because I could have posed the question to myself before going in to get that brownie and stuff my face. I could have said, okay, the irrational is you eating this late at night. It's not healthy. You're trying to eat healthier, right? The good choice is walk away. You'll be proud of yourself when you wake up in the morning that you didn't eat that brownie. It might sound like a silly example, but I just tried one that came out naturally. Um, but that's the beauty of that word you chose, choice. I love choice today.
Mm. And that's empowering if you put it to whatever your addiction was, or your escape of choice, whatever it is. I can choose to do this, right? Because that is ultimately what it is. Like even when you're having this massive craving or you're missing something, you still have a choice that you can make there.
Right.
And all of a sudden it becomes, well, I can't drink. It's like, well, is that true? What if you just chose not to? And it's just all of a sudden you take that power to yourself and it's like it just changes your entire outlook. Like, whoa, wait a second, what? I get a choice? Nobody's holding a gun to my head saying that I can't do something. Like,
Right.
that word choice does matter, like we've been talking about too, and how you talk to yourself and so much. And that's a part of the self-awareness is how you're choosing to look at things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is you speaking my language. Like this is what I share with clients. Like the way we talk to ourselves is so important. A singular word
Yes.
set us back. So I don't use absolutes. I don't use can't. I don't use never. I don't use always. And so if when I say I don't use it, perhaps I might say something like I always do this. Within 2 seconds, I can use my self-awareness and change that narrative to something other than an absolute. And you also, you mentioned something about like how we talk to ourselves. This is important for people who have co-occurring both substance use and mental health. So let's
Mhm.
say someone walks into treatment and they're struggling, they have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. Okay, call it depression and anxiety. And when I ask them if they have any past or present mental health, they say, I am depressed and I am anxiety. In that moment, I say to them, please, do you mind if I challenge the way you're communicating with yourself? They say, please, I do not mind. And what I invite them to think about is not identifying with their mental health diagnosis. So rather than say, I am depressed, let's change that narrative. I am struggling today with symptoms of depression. Now you're not continuing to identify yourself. That would be like me coming onto your podcast and saying, I am Jonathan depressed. Look, right? Like that's not a healthy way to view myself. But rather, so you can encourage someone to say, I am struggling with symptoms of depression. The more they can pull away from that identification of a mental health diagnosis, the more confident they'll get in overcoming their diagnoses. And
Mm.
what happens when that occurs? What happens is now their self-esteem goes up. They're not insecure as much anymore. They have a high self-worth, high self-esteem, healthy self-esteem, and they have confidence and a swag back to them. And that's all by the words they chose to start using, different than when they came in and identified with that diagnosis.
Hmm. That's Brene Brown, like this, blew my mind. She's been such a savior and like it her book Atlas of the Heart lit the way for me to be able to understand myself. It gave me vocabulary that I never had before. And in this she talks about the identity-based language versus behavioral-based language. And so if you can break that apart, like I am an idiot. Well, am I an idiot or did I just make a decision that was idiotic, right? And then all of a sudden you can break that apart. And it's like, oh, actually, it was just in that moment. I'm not always an idiot. Look at that time that I suggested something and it worked out. Now all of a sudden you're looking at things in a different way. And like that, exactly what you're saying is something that, like that self-talk is the quickest way to set yourself free to a point that you can enjoy your life now. Not when you retire, not when you get $1 million, right now.
Yeah.
That is the fastest way to get there. And so I love that we are focusing so much on this. And you said something earlier that what you just mentioned in this conversation, it brought it back up to me because I love the way that you said it. And that you mentioned that you have a healthy selfishness now. What does that mean to you? What do you mean when you say that?
Before I answer that, I can't forget to say this to you. You brought up Brene Brown.
Hmm.
I want to be the male version of Brene Brown. So when I tour and I give speaking engagements, I want to be the one that encourages people to have the courage to be vulnerable and ask for help. So not too many men, other than myself, have I heard say, cite Brene Brown. I'm a huge, huge fan of her. So thank you. So we're kindred spirits in many ways. So the healthy version, the two healthy versions that I love to encourage clients to have in recovery versus an active addiction. It's a healthy version of self-esteem, okay? Meaning we want to have humility over ego, right? I
Hmm.
had a huge ego in active addiction. Today I have a healthy version of ego with accompanied by a healthy self-esteem, meaning that's way below humility. Humility comes first here. Also, in the big book, what it talks about is being self-centeredness. So, what I believe in is a healthy version of being selfish.
Hmm.
And by that, I'll expound by saying when we're setting boundaries with people, that's a healthy version of being selfish. Why? Because we're putting ourselves first. But that's appropriate in recovery. Meaning, if I'm setting a boundary with John Doe and I'm asking John Doe or I'm to respect my boundary because that's what's good for me, that's a healthy version of being selfish. I'm looking at what's health good for me, right? I'm not being self-centered. I'm not saying I'm a big shot and I'm this and I'm that. I'm saying this is what I need to maintain my recovery today, because this is a one day at a time program. So that's the healthy version of both self-esteem and of selfishness.
I love those definitions because one of my friends, he lives in the UK, he goes by Up for the Challenge. He likes to talk about how we've made selfish a bad word, and there's
Mm,
nothing necessarily wrong with being selfish. It's actually a good thing.
yes.
And so, like having that healthy selfishness, and then um, I've told people this fairly often, right? That there a lot of people like, okay, who do you think the most important relationship you have in your life with is? Most people say their wife, their parents, their kids, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, why didn't you say yourself?
Love it.
And so many people are like, because it's not. And I'm like, no, it is. You just don't realize it yet.
Right.
And I
Right.
didn't realize it for a long time until I started to see that I was putting onto my kids the how I felt about me. And it's like, okay, that's not okay. And that was when it was like, okay, I got to do something very drastically different here than just what I was doing earlier, where I was trying to make things around me better, which is a good thing, but I needed to go inside at that point. And that was that pick. So that healthy selfishness, that healthy self-esteem. And you mentioned self-worth earlier. What's the difference between self-esteem and self-worth to you?
So I think the way I would look at it is self-esteem is associated with like ego.
Hmm.
And so the acronym for ego is edge God out. For me, my higher power is my God, right? So if I have a reasonably healthy version of self-esteem, it's not going to cross that line where it's unhealthy for me anymore. And my ego is not going to be like dictating the way that I think or behave. Self-worth, and that's more like a micro, right? So I'll break it down in terms of a micro perspective. On the macro level, that's self-worth. Self-worth is not limited. It's almost like to what you just shared, right? To the extent like if I love myself? Do I have a passion for life? Do I wake up and at times and smile? Do I laugh? Like, how do I view my self-worth? That's just expansive because my self-worth, if I have a healthy self-worth, reasonably high self-worth, that's going to have a ripple effect on myself in the way I conduct myself on a daily basis, as well as how I treat people and particularly my loved ones. And by having a healthy, self-worth, or I value myself with some reasonably high self-worth, I can be emotionally present today for my loved ones, for anyone who wants to communicate with me. And so for me, the self-worth is this like big macro sky that encompasses so many parts of my lifestyle that I can combine it to view myself that I'm worthy of this. Like even using the words "I get to do this" in sobriety means I have self-worth, right? The fact that I don't have to do anything, I get to do it. The self-esteem, though, if I had a high self-esteem, I'd be viewing self-worth very differently. It would almost be mirroring the ego. And if that happens, being emotionally present for other ones doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Mm, yes. And I mean, that's almost saying like if if it's your self-esteem that's that higher one, that's when you're insecure, right? When
Yeah.
that ego is high, like that's insecurities creeping in. You may not be aware of it, but it's at different points. And a lot of it looks like if you're feeling that shame, okay, that's probably an insecurity that came out. And if I look at that, I can kind of learn something about myself from that. Um, with that self-worth piece, I'm judging the how you began your story and what you've shared with us so far. My guess is you had to build that self-worth up.
Absolutely.
How did
Absolutely.
you go about discovering that that was something you had to do and building that up inside of yourself?
So my self-worth really didn't exist because at age 4, my father left me and abandoned myself and my younger brother and forced my mother to take 3 jobs and put food on the table for us. My mother is my rock today, along with my children and others. And she, at that time, emotionally and physically abused me, and I didn't feel worthy of anything. Father abandons me, mother struggling to put food on the table and a roof over our head. And I seem to take the brunt of that stress from her, which I totally understand. But for 46 years of my life, I suppressed that childhood trauma. So that's why I was insecure. That's why I had low self-esteem, but I pretended to the outer world that I was Superman in the entertainment space, working with the top celebrities in the world, but yet deep down inside, I was miserable. I didn't connect to my emotions. I had suicidal ideation. I just was really, I just I didn't like myself, but everyone else thought I did. Um, and so I realized once I started to see a therapist, as I mentioned earlier, when I came home into society, we did some EMDR work. And that really helped me to some degree release the suppressed emotions of 46 years so that my trauma from call it the last session of EMDR, was no longer suppressed and was flushed out. And that's when I really started, obviously, to go to addiction studies school to become KDAC, to go to marriage and family therapy grad school to become a therapist with an emphasis in addiction and trauma, because that was when I realized that I have a purpose to help others. I have a passion. This is what I enjoy. I'm being my authentic self. I'm not living in my basic pseudo self anymore. And because I could be authentic and transparent and hold myself accountable for my poor choices, I don't have to look over my shoulders anymore. And so I became proud of myself. So today I love to say to myself often, I'm proud of who I've become and I'm proud of who I'm becoming. That's all part of me adopting a reasonably high self-worth of myself today.
What do you think some of the first steps were for you in building that self-worth?
Asking for help,
Hmm.
asking for help, because I didn't ask for help for 46 years of my life. I thought that was a sign of a weakness. Asking for help today, as many people who know me will say, that I emphasize is a strength. So for any of your viewers that are struggling with substance use or mental health, please ask for help. You're worth it, although you might not believe it. Just simply ask for help. That for me was the moment where I realized I surrendered to my higher power. And I actually surrendered to my higher power probably multiple times a day. I again, I'm far from perfect. And just because I work in treatment and I have a strong program doesn't mean I don't have thoughts that or stressors in my life that I can't do alone. and I turn it over to my higher power and I accept whatever my higher power's message is to me today.
Mm. It's like what you just shared is so powerful. And it's that opportunity for people to check in with themselves and be honest, right? Be honest to a fault right now. Like, who could I reach out to and just share something with? Anything. Just share something about yourself, like what's going on, like real, something real, not just, hey, traffic sucks today. Hey, it's been raining outside and I'm feeling like dragging on. Like sharing, hey, I'm having some financial struggles and it's really dragging me down right now. Hey, I've had some things that go wrong and I feel like I'm going to get fired and I'm looking over my shoulder and it's getting me to the point where I can't sleep. Like just and let yourself see how people react to that and
Beautiful.
how all of a sudden the way you react to yourself will be so much different after you see that somebody giving someone that opportunity to be there for you.
It's well said. And that's why, like, we go back to assertive, right? There's also the
Mhm.
assertive way to communicate outwardly, but it's also assertive in terms of our listening skills, right? So, like, if I'm talking to you like now, we're on Zoom. I'm
Mhm.
not because I'm like loving what you're saying. My head's going up and down because I totally subscribe to the words that you're expressing, right? People want to be heard. We all want to be heard. But instead of interrupting someone, because like an act of addiction, if I was talking to you, RJ, and in the first 3 seconds, I want to interrupt you and give you the solution because I don't have the bandwidth to listen to it. In recovery, I'm sitting here nodding because I'm in awe of what you're sharing and how you're expressing yourself because you deserve to be heard. People deserve to be heard. And so that's assertive active listening skill. And that's something that there's so many beautiful um, life tools and life skills that I've acquired in recovery. And I
Mhm.
really truly believe this. And I'm not preaching the 12 steps. 12 steps work for me. As I mentioned earlier, there's other fellowships out there that may work for others as well. But the beauty of a fellowship is the commonality in the room. When you, like you said, when you're asking for help, you can call a sponsor if you're working the steps. You can build your sober peer network, going back into that, what we said earlier about healthy, surrounding yourself with healthy people. Like there should be no fears. Like the shoulds and absolutes. So I'm going to change that. The likelihood of having fears goes down significantly when you surround yourself with sober peers that you know will not judge you and will be there. All you have to do is be vulnerable, have the courage to ask for help. And it could be, like you said, anything. It could be financial. It could be, I'm struggling with my job today. Whatever it is, we here in the fellowship are here to help you.
And that is when you recognize that it's something that is, well, here's what it is. And, I've been able to name this for a little while, but it's the fact that in this fellowship that we are in, we're all in glass houses. So, you know what we're not going to do? We're not going to throw stones. So, it's that lack of judgment that is there. Like, I could share my story, you've shared your story, and guess what? There's not any judgment. And so all of a sudden, you feel this burden off of you because you realize I can just be me. And that's
Yes.
okay. I don't have to be, I can take these masks off. I don't have to be anybody else. And that's some of that freedom that is available when you start to build that community around you.
Yeah.
Um, One question that I have for you, Jonathan, that is, um, I'm interested to hear your answer and how you got to it. Uh, but I would like to know, have you forgiven yourself?
The short answer is yes, and I'll elaborate. Forgiveness, as you and I both know, is a big part of being able to maintain sobriety. And the act of forgiveness isn't so much to the person that I'm trying to that, when I'm making amends, I'm not really making amends to the recipient because I'm sorry. I mean, I've wronged them, yes, but I don't use the word sorry. And I'm legitimately identifying the amends and the harm I caused them, right? But how they react to that, I create no expectation when making the amends. I hope they forgive me, but more importantly, I forgive myself because I'm making the amends. So I choose to forgive myself because, as I said earlier, if I go back to that 9 month period and continue to play the self pity victim role, it will be virtually impossible for me to maintain a strong recovery. I get to free myself from all the wrongs and all the mistakes and all the poor choices that I've made historically. I hurt so many people. If I just focused on my past like that, I would not find forgiveness for within myself. But knowing that that person in active addiction and taking full responsibility and owning all of those poor choices has given me the freedom to transition to a place where I can say again, I don't live in yesterday, but I don't forget yesterday. And I can continue to say to myself that I'm proud of myself today and who I'm becoming today. And that's the freedom, as you say, which I think is such a beautiful word, gives me the opportunity to find forgiveness for myself. Because deep
That
down inside, I always knew who I was. I thought I knew who I was. I just didn't have the moral compass and integrity that I thought I had. Today, I have that moral compass and integrity because of this program and because I could forgive myself for all the wrongs that I've done. It doesn't mean I don't have days that I feel sad that I did what I did. If I see one of my celebrities on TV I used to represent, or if I'm listening to the music of some of my former clients, it brings me back to some sadness. How could I have hurt them? How could I have done that? But that lasts for about 10 seconds because I can't live in that anymore. And that's why I choose to forgive myself.
that's that is beautiful and such a great answer. And it's something that I hope that other people can look at inside of themselves and find that for themselves, because that is also something that if you can't find it, you're going to be tethered to your past, like you said. And whatever you can, I'm big on giving people permission to define words for themselves. And I think forgiveness is a big one that people need to define for themselves so that you can start to live it. And that is something that the power that comes from forgiving yourself, no matter what it is, it doesn't, like you said, it's not that you're not holding yourself accountable. It's not that you're forgetting and never coming back to it. It's that you're understanding that you're human and you're moving forward so that you can be the person that you know you are, that you want to be, the person you're aspiring to be. And if you're stuck in the past, you're not going to be moving towards that person. You're going to be tethered and it's going to hold you down.
Right, like how many times have you said to yourself, or I know I've said to myself, like, and also invited clients, like, just be kind to yourself today. Don't be so
Mm.
hard on yourself. Like, just be kind. When would we have said that in active addiction? Be kind to yourself. Really? I'm gonna go get high. What do you mean, be kind to myself?
I wouldn't know. I would like 6 years into like not drinking. I wasn't kind to myself. So I would have been like, "What do you mean be kind to yourself? What kind of woo woo fluff are you bringing here?" Like, listen,
Right,
we're blue collar workers. We actually get this thing done. Let's like, we don't have time for feelings. We don't have time for kindness.
right. It's so true. Like, be kind is not foo-foo. It's just a beautiful way that we in
Yes.
sobriety live.
Well, and that's when I was honest with myself and I would look around. It's like I was kind to everybody else except for me.
Mm,
And so now all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got to look at things a lot different because what have I done that I don't deserve that?
yeah.
And it's like that's the part where I was like, okay, I need to take a step back and actually look at, how I'm interacting with me. And man, that was powerful. So, Jonathan, what is the book that you wrote, and how can people find it?
So my book, I hope my book will come out in about a year from now. We're working on the title.
Hmm.
Um, I'm on my professional Instagram is called The Real Jonathan Schwartz. Um, I don't believe I have an email there, but you can message me there if you want. And I will I will let everybody know there when the book is ready to launch. And in the book, I will have lots of details about the entertainment space, about the road to redemption and recovery, but with a lot more detail, which will be followed up by a movie. So I'm
Mm,
looking for a book in a year and a movie in about a year and a half, 2 years. And it's going to be like Wolf of Wall Street on steroids.
wow, that's going to be powerful. Um, if you could leave the listeners with one thing, what would that be?
I want to go back to please ask for help. Please ask for help. Um, please do the work. You're worth it. So work it.
Mm, that's you're worth it, so work it. That, that's a war cry. That's an affirmation. That's something that you can use in those times that are tough. I love that. Thank you for joining us today, Jonathan. This was a delight. I appreciate all the nuggets that you were able to share. And just please go out there, listeners, and give Jonathan a follow. And you'll pay attention to what he's got going on, because this is really amazing stuff. So thank you for joining us. And everybody, let's try to be better tomorrow than we were today. At least we don't make it, we tried. Have a great week, everybody. I love you.